Have you ever felt the weight of the world pressing down on you, as if every step forward is heavier than the last? Imagine wandering through life, carrying burdens that seem too vast to name, until one day you find yourself at the edge of something ancient, something alive. That's where our journey begins tonight, at the threshold of Fangorn Forest, where the whispers of the Ents, the ancient tree shepherds of Middle-earth, rustle through the leaves like a secret waiting to be heard. Whether you're joining us under the glow of a midnight sky or the soft light of dawn, we'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? Let us know in the comments below and tell us what time it is where you are. There's something magical about knowing we're all here together, drawn to the same timeless wisdom. Picture this: a traveler, weary and worn, stands at the border of Fangorn, where the air hums with an energy so old it feels like a heartbeat. The trees here aren't just trees, they're keepers of stories, guardians of a wisdom that predates kingdoms and crowns. The traveler hesitates, caught between the fear of the unknown and the crushing familiarity of despair. But then, a breeze stirs, and the leaves seem to speak, not in words, but in a language of rustling and roots, promising answers to questions they've carried for years. Have you ever felt that pull, the sense that somewhere, just beyond sight, there's a truth waiting to be uncovered? Tonight, we're stepping into that forest together, leaving the noise of the modern world behind to really listen, to the ancient voices of the Ents. Their slow, deliberate way of being holds secrets about patience, about connection, about the quiet strength that comes from standing firm in a world that never stops rushing. This isn't just a story from a book. It's an invitation to slow down, to breathe, to remember what it means to be part of something vast and enduring. So settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let the whispers of Fangorn wrap around you like roots, grounding you deep into the earth. The forest is waiting, and its wisdom is yours to discover. The moment the traveler's fingers brush against the rough, weathered bark, the forest itself seems to exhale. A vibration travels up their arm, not a sound but a presence, a voice that isn't heard with ears but felt in the bones, like the distant rumble of thunder before a storm. Hum-ham, it begins, each syllable unfolding as slowly as a budding leaf. The ant is old, so old its thoughts move like roots through deep soil, patient and deliberate. It asks no questions, yet the traveler feels an unspoken invitation, as if the tree's silence is a cup waiting to be filled with their story. Words tumble out, the cracked earth beyond the forest's edge, the rivers that no longer sing, the weight of carrying a dying world on weary shoulders. The traveler's voice shakes, not with fear, but with the exhaustion of someone who's been running too long. The ant listens, its silence deeper than any reply could be. When it finally speaks again, the words are simple. To see the wound, one must first stand still. It's not the answer the traveler hoped for. There's no quick fix, no spell to reverse the blight. Only the quiet understanding that healing begins where rushing ends. A choice hangs in the air, thick as the scent of damp moss. The traveler could turn away, chase faster answers beyond the forest, or they could stay, let the Ent's slow wisdom sink in, learn to listen to the language of creaking branches and shifting roots. The wind stirs, carrying the scent of earth and ancient bark, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. Every story has a turning point, not in battles or grand gestures, but but in moments like this, when someone chooses to sit at the feet of the old and truly hear them. The Ent's next words come softer, like leaves brushing against stone. You carry the weight of asking, but have you carried the weight of waiting? The bark beneath the traveler's palm pulses like a slow, steady drumbeat, a rhythm older than memory. The Ent's voice rumbles through the ground, not in words, but in vibrations that travel up through souls and settle in the chest. Listen, it seems to say, though no sound leaves its ancient lips. At first, all the traveler hears is silence. Then, like a distant melody tuning itself, the forest begins to speak. Branches creak in a wind that isn't wind, a language of bending and groaning, of roots whispering secrets through tangled networks beneath the soil. It's a symphony of patience, each note stretching across centuries, and the traveler's breath catches. How could they have missed this before? But urgency claws at their throat. Every second spent here feels like a grain of sand, slipping through an hourglass. Somewhere beyond these trees, the world is burning. They shift, restless, and the Ent's leaves shiver in disapproval. Hasty folk, it murmurs, the words thick as sap. To hear the forest, you must move as it does. The traveler clenches their fists, torn between the need to act and the dawning realization that they've been deaf to the very ground they walk on. What if the answers they seek aren't in rushing forward, but in sinking deeper? Then the earth trembles. A sound like splintering wood rips through the air, too sharp, too sudden, a discordant note in the forest's hymn. Trees shudder as something massive crashes through the undergrowth, its breath reeking of fire and metal. The traveler's pulse races. Instinct screams to run, to put distance between themselves and this encroaching violence. But the Ent doesn't flinch. It stands, roots gripping the soil like fingers, clasping a loved one's hand. And in that moment, the traveler understands. Fangorn isn't just a place. It's a choice. To flee is to remain a stranger to the earth's song. To stay is to learn what it means to hold your ground, even when the world tries to carve its name into your skin. The roar grows closer. Leaves tremble as if in warning, and the air tastes like charred promises. The traveler looks down at their hands calloused from grasping at solutions that always slipped away, and wonders if they've been holding the wrong things all along. The Ent's voice comes again, softer now, almost lost beneath the approaching storm. Roots do not run, and just like that, the choice crystallizes, not between safety and danger, but between living as the world has taught them, or learning to live as the trees do, deeply stubbornly, with every fiber turned toward the light. A scream of splitting wood echoes through the forest, a sound so wrong it cuts deeper than any blade. The traveler whirls toward the noise, and there, between the gnarled trunks, they see them, men with axes gleaming like teeth, biting into the flesh of an ancient oak. Each strike sends a shudder through the ground, as if the earth itself is gasping. The Ents don't roar or charge. Their anger is quieter, deeper, like the gathering pressure before a landslide. Leaves tremble, roots tighten, and the traveler realizes with a jolt they can feel it too. Every fallen branch, every severed root, it's all a wound they now share. The air thickens with the scent of sap, sharp and bitter as grief. One of the loggers laughs, kicking aside a cluster of saplings like they're nothing. The traveler's hands curl into fists, muscles coil to sprint forward, to shout, to do something. But then, a hand of bark and vine settles on their shoulder, The oldest Ent, its eyes glowing like embers in the dark, shakes its head slowly. Hasty blows feed hasty fires. It murmurs. The words land like stones. Is rushing in now just another kind of violence? But the axes keep falling. Another tree groans, its trunk cracking like a broken bone. The traveler's breath comes fast, torn between the fire in their veins and the Ent's impossible calm. Then, beneath their feet, the soil shifts. Something is waking, not with a battle cry, but with the inevitability of tides. Roots surge upward, tangling around boots and axe handles. Branches bend low, not to strike, but to cradle the fallen, as if the forest is gathering its children close. The loggers shout, stumbling back, but the earth itself seems to reject them, mud sucking at their heels. The traveler watches, heart pounding. This isn't a war fought with steel, but with time. The Ents don't conquer, they endure, and in that moment, the choice becomes clear. To fight like a human is to meet haste with haste. To stand with the Ents is to trust that some storms pass not because they are outrun, but because they are outlasted. The oldest Ent turns its gaze westward, where the last light of day stains the leaves gold. They will not return, it says simply, not a threat, a fact. Silence settles, heavy as dew. The loggers are gone, but the scars remain. The traveler kneels, pressing their palm to the ravaged ground. Something wet hits the soil, their own tears. They realize, mixing with the sap seeping from the wounded oak. The Ent's shadow falls over them, vast and gentle. Grief is the price of love, it rumbles, but love is why we grow. Above, a single leaf drifts down, landing in the traveler's open hand, still green. Still alive, the forest breathes around them, wounded but unbroken, and for the first time, the traveler understands. Fangorn doesn't need saving, it needs witnesses. The wind rises, carrying away the scent of blood and iron, replacing it with moss and mist. Night creeps in, not as an ending, but as a blanket. Somewhere deep in the dark, a new sapling pushes through the soil. The ground trembles with footsteps, older than cities, as Treebeard moves toward the heart of Fangorn, his bark creaking like the hull of some great ship. Around him, shadows shift, not from the setting sun, but from the gathering of his kin. Ents emerge from the twilight, their eyes glowing like fireflies trapped in amber, each step measured, deliberate. The traveler stands among them, small as a sprout in a grove of ancient oaks, their breath shallow against the weight of centuries pressing in. Treebeard's voice rolls through the clearing like boulders, settling in a riverbed. The wind carries foul whispers, he rumbles, smoke and blade song. The other Ents murmur, their words overlapping like roots, tangling underground. Some speak of patience, of watching and waiting as they have for ages. Others, like beech bone, lean forward, their branches quivering. The world burns while we breathe deep. He argues, the first hint of urgency any of them have shown. The traveler's chest tightens. This isn't just a debate. It's a turning point. They step forward, leaves crunching beneath their boots, and the forest falls silent. Out there, they begin, voice shaking. The land gasps, rivers run black. Villages vanish beneath armies that march without seeing the ground they trample. The words pour out, raw as an open wound. You call us hasty, but we're drowning, and if you wait much longer, there'll be no saplings left to nurse. A hush falls, even the wind stills. Treebeard's eyes, deep as caverns, fix on the traveler, whom he sighs, and the sound carries the weight of 1,000 winters. Men chop their own branches and wonder why the shade grows thin. The others grumble agreement, but there's a shift now, a restlessness in the way their roots flex against the soil. Then, from the back of the gathering, an ent named Leaflock speaks, his voice thin as parchment. "We are not warriors," he whispers. "To fight is to become what we resist." But Quickbeam, youngest of the elders, shakes his canopy so hard acorns rain down, and to stand idle is to let the axe fall. The disagreement crackles like dry kindling, the first spark of division Fangorn has known in an age. The traveler watches, heart pounding. This isn't just about armies and borders, it's about time itself, the slow, inevitable turn of roots versus the desperate sprint of a species always outrunning its own shadow. Treebeard lifts a gnarled hand, and the forest holds its breath. The Entwives once tended gardens, he murmurs, almost to himself. Now even the memory of their songs is dust. His gaze sweeps over the gathering, lingering on the traveler. What grows in haste withers in haste, but a pause, long enough for a sapling to stretch toward the sun. What does not grow at all, the silence stretches, taut as a bowstring. Somewhere high above, an eagle cries, its voice sharp against the gathering dark. The traveler closes their eyes. They know now what the Ents must decide, not just for Middle-earth, but for themselves. To remain is to fade into legend. To act is to risk becoming something they no longer recognize. And in that terrible, beautiful moment, the forest waits, not for an answer, but for the courage to choose one. Days stretch like tree rings beneath the boughs of Fangorn, each morning and evening, marked not by the frantic ticking of clocks, but by the slow arc of sunlight across moss-cradled roots. The traveler sits cross-legged beside Treebeard, fingers buried in the loamy soil, trying and failing to match their breath to the rhythm of sap rising through ancient trunks. "You humans," rumbles the ent, not unkindly, "blink like mayflies against the sky." The words land softly, but they sting all the same. How does one explain the crushing urgency of a mortal life to beings who measure time in seasons of acorns? Yet the forest begins to teach its lessons in unexpected ways. When the traveler wakes one dawn to find their boots half swallowed by ivy, Treebeard chuckles, a sound like boulders tumbling down a distant hill. The earth claims what stands still long enough, he muses. It's then the traveler realizes their restlessness isn't just fear of wasted time, but fear of being truly seen. Among the Ents, there's no hiding behind motion. Every doubt, every grief, takes root in the silence between heartbeats. In turn, the traveler shares stories of human lives, brief as candle flames, bright as midsummer lightning. They speak of children growing tall between one visit and the next, of love letters written in hands that will someday tremble with age. The Ents listen, their leaves shivering as if brushed by an unseen wind. "So quick to bloom," murmurs Beachbone, tracing a fingertip over the traveler's calloused palm. "So quick too," he doesn't finish. The word, fade, hangs unspoken in the air, heavy as the scent of damp bark after rain. But the world beyond the trees refuses to wait. Distant axes resume their cruel chorus, closer now, their metallic hunger echoing through the valleys. The traveler's nails dig into their thighs, torn between the Ents' unshakable calm and the screaming instinct to run, to fight. Treebeard watches the horizon, his gaze deeper than the roots of mountains. They will come, he says simply, not a warning, a fact. That night, as fireflies stitch constellations between the branches, the traveler paces beneath the oldest oak in the clearing. Every step feels like betrayal of the forest's teachings, of their own fraying patience. But when they close their eyes, they don't see patient roots. They see blackened stumps where orchards once stood, hear the wails of mothers clutching ash-coated children. The Ents may have centuries to deliberate, but the traveler's people have only now. As if sensing the storm within, Quickbeam approaches, his young limbs still supple enough to bend without creaking. "You're measuring our stillness against your movement," he observes, as if one must drown the other. His voice carries none of Treebeard's weighty certainty, only curiosity and something perilously close to doubt. The traveler freezes. Is that the true choice here? Between speed and slowness, or is there a third path, one that honors both the urgency of fire and the wisdom of stone? A branch snaps in the dark beyond the clearing. Not the gentle sigh of a settling tree, but the crisp, deliberate crack of someone approaching. The traveler's pulse leaps like a hare flushed from cover. The Ents don't stir. They've known this moment was coming since the first axe bit into distant wood. Now it's here, and the air thrums with unasked questions. Will the traveler meet violence with violence, proving men and monsters cut from the same cloth? Or will they stand like the trees, not passive, but profoundly rooted, trusting that some battles are won not by striking first, but by enduring longest? Somewhere overhead, an owl calls. The traveler exhales, their breath fogging in the moonlit air, and makes their choice, not with a shout, not with a blade, but by kneeling slowly, pressing both palms to the cold earth, and waiting, really waiting, for the forest to tell them what comes next. The sound splits the air like a scream, a groan of rending wood, a thunderous crash that shakes the earth beneath the traveler's feet. The ancient oak falls in slow motion, its branches clawing at the sky, as if begging for one last breath. The impact sends up a cloud of leaves and dust, and for a heartbeat, the forest holds its breath. Then the echo comes, not just through the air, but through the roots beneath the traveler's boots. A vibration of loss so profound, it feels like the land itself is weeping. Rage floods the traveler's veins, hot and blinding, their fingers close around the handle of a discarded axe, its blade still sticky with sap. Every muscle tenses, coiled to charge into the fray, to meet steel with steel. But before they can take a single step, bark-covered fingers wrap gently around their wrist. Treebeard's touch is firm, but not unkind, his voice a low rumble like distant landslide. Violence breeds violence, he murmurs, the words weighted with centuries of watching wars rise and fall like seasons. The traveler shakes, torn between the fire in their chest and the cool, unyielding patience in the Ents' gaze. "They are killing you," they choke out, voice raw. "How can you just stand there?" Treebeard's eyes, deep as riverbeds, hold something unbearable, not judgment, but sorrow. He sighs. A tree that strikes back becomes the axe. Somewhere beyond the clearing, men laugh, their voices sharp against the forest's grief. The sound scrapes against the traveler's nerves, and for a wild moment, they consider wrenching free. Isn't rage justified when the world is burning? Isn't it right to fight fire with fire? But then the wind shifts, carrying the scent of crushed ferns and the metallic tang of blood. Not just the trees, but the nicked palms of the loggers, the sweat on their brows. These men aren't monsters. They're hungry, desperate, blind. The axe handle grows slick in the traveler's grip. This isn't just a choice about battle. It's a choice about what kind of world survives after. The Ents know the truth. You can't carve peace with a blade, but the traveler isn't an Ent. Their heart still pounds like a war drum. Their breath comes fast. Yet beneath the fury, something else stirs the memory of roots, weaving silently through the dark, of branches that bend but don't break. Treebeard releases their wrist, leaving the weight of the axe and the choice in their hands. The forest waits, not in silence, but in a language older than anger, the creak of living wood, the whisper of leaves brushing against one another like a shared secret. The traveler's fingers loosen. The axe falls, embedding itself in the soft earth, blade down, as if planting a seed. In the distance, the logger's voices fade. The traveler doesn't know if they'll return, doesn't know if this moment will change anything. But the oldest oak in the clearing stretches a shadow over them, dappled with sunlight, and for the first time, the traveler understands what it means to stand their ground without striking. The forest doesn't win, it endures, and sometimes that's the quietest rebellion of all. The ground shudders as the Ents step forward, not with the reckless fury of men, but with the terrible inevitability of tides turning. Roots tear free from the soil like waking serpents, sending clods of earth tumbling through the air. The loggers' axes slip from their hands as the trees themselves begin to move, not charging, not attacking, simply rising to their full, impossible height until their crowns blot out the sun. The traveler runs alongside, lungs burning, but their fear isn't for themselves. It's for the men now scrambling backward, their faces white with the primal terror of creatures who have just realized the ground beneath them is alive. One logger trips, sprawling onto his back as Treebeard looms over him, bark groaning with each breath. The man squeezes his eyes shut, waiting for the crushing weight of a 1,000-year-old fist. But the blow never comes. When he dares to look, the Ent is simply watching him, eyes like knots in weathered wood, unreadable and deep. Go, Treebeard rumbles, and the word carries the weight of a landslide held in check. The men don't hesitate. They flee, their boots kicking up mud, their shouts fading into the distance. The traveler expects triumph, vindication, but the forest doesn't cheer. The Ents stand motionless, their roots settling back into the torn earth like hands, folding after a difficult task. They will remember, Beachbone murmurs, brushing a fingertip over the fresh stump of his fallen cousin. The words aren't a threat, they are a lament. Silence falls, thick as moss. The traveler's pulse slows, their breath steadying, and in that quiet, something shifts. The lesson isn't in the march, nor even in the fear it inspired. It's in the stillness that follows the way the Ents don't give chase, don't burn villages in retribution. Their power isn't in destruction, but in the unbearable weight of their witness. To be seen by something so ancient, so patient, is its own reckoning. Yet when the traveler turns their gaze west, beyond the sheltering boughs of Fangorn, plumes of smoke still stain the horizon. The world out there keeps burning, keeps hurrying toward its own ruin. Treebeard follows their gaze, his sigh like wind through a hollow log. "You are not one of us," he says gently. "Your roots walk." The truth of it lands like a falling branch. The traveler could stay, learn to measure time in rings instead of heartbeats. Let ivy claim their boots as the seasons turn. But beyond these trees, children still cry for bread, mothers still whisper prayers into the dark, and every moment spent here feels like a betrayal of those who don't have centuries to wait. The oldest Ent reaches down, snapping off a twig from his own limb. It gleams green at the break, sap bright and alive. He presses it into the traveler's palm, closing their fingers around it with care. "Some songs must travel," he murmurs. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of rain and distant fires, and the traveler understands. Wisdom isn't meant to be hoarded like acorns in a hollow. It's meant to take root where it's needed most, even, perhaps especially, in places too hasty to know they're starving for it. A choice hangs in the air, heavy as storm clouds. To stay is to become part of the forest's slow, unyielding heartbeat. To leave is to carry that heartbeat into a world that's forgotten how to listen. The traveler looks down at the twig in their hand, its leaves already trembling as if eager for the wind, and knows their feet have already decided. Somewhere beyond the trees, the earth is waiting, not for a savior, but for a witness who's learned to speak its language. The fire crackles low between them, its glow painting the Ent's bark in flickering amber. Treebeard's voice rolls out like roots, unspooling through rich soil, recounting days when elf princes walked these woods with starlight caught in their hair. The traveler leans in, catching names half-forgotten Lothlorien in its silver prime, Khazad Doom's echoing halls before the shadows woke. Each syllable carries weight, not just of history, but of kinship, a reminder that every fallen leaf once belonged to a greater canopy. Something loosens in the traveler's chest as they listen. The wars they fled, the scars they bear, these aren't the first wounds the world has known. Treebeard speaks of dwarven kings who dug too deep, of elven lords who loved their treasures more than their people, and the traveler sees their own reflection in those ancient mistakes. How small their despair seems now, set against the slow unspooling of centuries. Yet when they glance down at their hands, still calloused from gripping swords and plows alike, the old urgency returns. What good is wisdom if it stays locked in the forest's heart? A moth drifts into the circle of firelight, its wings brushing the Ent's knotted fingers. "Whom?" murmurs Treebeard, watching it rise again. Memory is a seed, it must travel to grow. The words settle like dew on parched earth. The traveler could stay here forever, wrapped in the comfort of tales where every ending is already written. But out there, beyond the trees, mothers still tell their children stories by dying hearths, believing no one remembers how to mend the world. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of rain from the east. Somewhere beyond Fangorn's borders, a village is deciding whether to cut down the last sacred grove for firewood. A king drafts another war proclamation, blind to the rot in his own granaries. The traveler's fingers curl around the twig Treebeard gave them, its sap sticky against their palm. Knowledge alone won't replant forests or quiet hungry bellies. It needs hands to carry it, voices to shape it into something the desperate can hold on to. Dawn stains the horizon when the traveler finally rises. Their joints ache from sitting still so long. A human body wasn't made for Entish patience. Treebeard watches as they strap on their pack, the fire reduced to embers between them. No grand farewells, no promises carved in oak, just a slow nod as one gives to the turning of seasons. The traveler steps past the first line of birch trees, then hesitates. Behind them, the forest breathes. Ahead, the road winds into lands where time moves like a blade falling. They take a breath, and the twig in their pocket hums faintly, as if rooting itself to their heartbeat. The choice was never really between staying or going. It was between being a witness or a voice, and the world, for all its rushing, is desperately quiet where it matters most. The weight of the seed in the traveler's pocket feels heavier than stone. It pulses faintly, like a second heartbeat against their thigh, its rhythm out of sync with their own frantic pulse. Around them, the forest exhales a sigh that rustles through the leaves tucked into their pack, each one murmuring secrets only the wind understands. Treebeard stands at the edge of the clearing, his bark silvered by dawn's first light, watching as the traveler adjusts straps and buckles with trembling fingers. "You carry more than roots now," rumbles the Ent, his voice softer than the traveler has ever heard it. The words aren't a warning, they're an offering, like a cupped handful of water to a parched throat. The traveler nods, throat too tight to speak. How do you thank someone for trusting you with a piece of their soul? The seed isn't just a plant. It's a fragment of Fangorn's memory, its stubborn, unyielding hope. To bury it in barren soil is to bet that the world still has room for slow, quiet miracles. A gust of wind tugs at the traveler's cloak, as if the forest itself is reluctant to let go. They take a step backward, then another, their boots crushing last autumn's leaves into the earth. With each retreating footfall, the voices in their pack grow fainter, the whispers blending into the chorus of waking birds. The line between Fangorn and the outside world isn't marked by stones or fences, it's a threshold of sound, of presence. One moment, the trees are singing. The next, there's only silence, and the traveler stands utterly alone. The road ahead winds through fields long since stripped of trees, the furrows cracked and dry. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a village kneels under the weight of a failing harvest, its people too desperate to remember the old ways of speaking to the land. The traveler's fingers drift to their pocket, tracing the seed's rough husk. What if it refuses to grow in soil that's forgotten how to listen? What if they're not brave enough to teach it? A crow calls overhead, sharp and mocking. The traveler squares their shoulders. Fangorn's wisdom wasn't given to them because they were worthy. It was given because the world is wounded, and wounds don't wait for heroes. They take a deep breath, filling their lungs with air that no longer tastes of moss and mist, and begin to walk. The seed's pulse quickens, as if it knows. Every journey begins with a single step, and every great tree once fit inside a trembling palm. The village rises from the cracked earth like a scar, its huts huddled together, as if shrinking from the sun's relentless gaze. Children with hollow cheeks pause their games to stare as the traveler kneels in the dust, fingers carving a shallow grave for Fangorn's gift. The seed disappears into the parched soil, so small against the vast, thirsty land. A woman with hands like leather snorts. "You'd have better luck planting stones," she mutters, kicking dust over the spot. Others murmur agreement. Trees are a luxury for those who can wait decades for shade. The traveler's chest tightens. They've walked too far, seen too much, to explain that waiting isn't surrender. Night falls like a shroud, the air thick with the scent of desperation and burnt grain. The traveler lies awake, listening to the village's restless sighs. Doubt creeps in like a thief. What if the Ents were wrong? What if some soils are too broken to remember how to nurture? They nearly dig up the seed then, desperate to shield it from the villagers' scorn, but something stops them. The memory of Treebeard's voice, patient as deep roots. Even stones dream of becoming mountains. Then, a sound, faint as a mouse's breath, but unmistakable. The traveler bolts upright. There, in the moonlight, the earth trembles. A crack splits the dust, and from it rises a tendril so green it hurts to look at, unfurling like a hand reaching for the stars. The roots don't grow, they whisper, threading through the dirt with purpose, seeking secret veins of water even the villagers forgot existed. By dawn, the seedling stands knee-high, leaves wide as coins, drinking in the sun as if making up for lost time. The villagers gather in stunned silence. A child breaks free from her mother's grip, pressing her palm to the trunk. The bark pulses under her touch, warm with life. It's singing, she gasps. The traveler watches hope flicker across hardened faces, but their smile fades as the wind shifts, carrying the acrid tang of smoke from the east. This miracle is just beginning, and the world, they know, has a way of testing fragile things. The elder of the village steps forward, his shadow falling across the sapling. One tree won't fill our bellies, he grumbles, though his fingers linger on a leaf, as if remembering something precious. The traveler meets his gaze, the unspoken challenge hanging between them. Will you shelter this spark, or stamp it out before it lights the dark? Somewhere overhead, a single bird trills not a village sound, not a human sound, but the forest's voice, carried farther than anyone thought possible. The days stretch thin as old parchment, each sunrise revealing the same cracked earth, radiating outward from the sapling's fragile shade. The traveler counts every new leaf, measures every inch of growth, yet beyond its slender shadow, the land lies gasping. At night, they press their ear to the ground, straining for the whisper of roots, stretching deeper, but hear only silence. Doubt coils in their stomach like a hungry thing. Did they carry the seed wrong? Did their own restless hands bury it too shallow, too fast? The Ents' lessons, once so clear beneath Fangorn's boughs, now seem distant as stars behind storm clouds. Then, small fingers brush their sleeve. The child from the village crouches beside them, dirt smudged across her nose, her palm flat against the sapling's trunk. It's lonely, she says, matter of fact, as if stating that rain is wet or fire burns. The traveler blinks. They've been so fixed on the tree's survival, they never considered its solitude. Trees talk to one another, don't they? That's what Quickbeam told them. Roots weaving secret conversations beneath the soil, branches sharing warnings on the wind. This sapling has no one to listen to, no one to answer. A gust kicks up dust, stinging their eyes, of course. The Ents didn't teach that strength comes from standing alone, but from standing together. Fangorn didn't endure because its trees were stubborn. It endured because they were countless. The traveler looks down at the child, who's now tracing the veins of a fallen leaf with solemn focus. What if, they begin slowly, we gave it friends? The girl's head tilts. You mean more magic trees, not magic, the traveler corrects, though the word feels inadequate. just trees that remember how to be trees. The ones the villagers cut down years ago for firewood, the ones they forgot how to tend, the ones whose stumps might still cling to life beneath the dust, if someone knew how to ask. That night, the traveler kneels not by the sapling, but by the village elder's hearth. The firelight paints his skepticism in flickering gold. You want us to waste good planting soil on trees. He grunts. When the wheat barely sprouts as it is, the traveler breathes deep, catching the ghost of wood smoke, the scent of countless forests reduced to ash. The first tree didn't make the rain come, they admit, but it remembered how to call it. Imagine what a grove could do. Silence hangs thick. Then, from the shadows, the child's voice pipes up, "I'll help dig." One by one, heads turn. A young mother with sunken cheeks rubs her wrists, remembering the apple orchard her grandmother once sang to. The blacksmith flexes fingers calloused from forging plows, yet softer from the fig saplings he nursed as a boy. Even the elder's gaze drifts to the doorway, where the first tree's leaves rustle in a wind that carries the faintest hint of dampness. The traveler doesn't promise miracles. They don't speak of Ents or ancient wisdom. They simply hold out their hands, palms upturned, and let the silence stretch. Not the silence of absence, but the kind that settles between people when they're deciding whether to trust the ground beneath them. Somewhere outside, the sapling's branches creak, as if leaning toward the voices murmuring in the dark. The morning sun paints the village square in pale gold as the traveler gathers the first listeners. A shepherd leaning on his crook, two farmers still smelling of turned earth, an elder with hands knotted from decades of harvests. They come not for promises of miracles, but because the stranger's pockets bulge with acorns, and curiosity is a hunger even famine hasn't dulled. The traveler begins haltingly, tripping over words meant for roots, not human ears. How to explain the way Ents greet the dawn by counting the rings in their own bark. How to describe patience that runs deeper than rivers. Laughter cuts through the air like a scythe. Trees that talk, scoffs the youngest farmer, wiping sweat from his brow. Next you'll say rocks recite poetry, but the elder doesn't join the jeering. His gaze lingers on the traveler's calloused palms, where a single oak leaf rests, still improbably green. My grandfather, he murmurs, so quiet the others lean in, used to sing to his cherry saplings. Said it made the fruit sweeter. The words hang in the air, fragile as a spider's thread. By afternoon, they're kneeling at the village's edge, pressing seeds into soil so dry it crumbles like old bread. The shepherd's hands, rough from wrestling sheep, fumble with a hazelnut. How long, he grunts, squinting at the traveler. The truth, decades, centuries sticks in the traveler's throat. Instead, they tell of Quickbeam, the ant who grew tall in half the time of his kin, because he loved the sun too fiercely to wait. The shepherd snorts, but his next seed goes in with surprising gentleness. Doubt creeps in with the evening shadows. The villagers scatter to supper, leaving half-planted rows behind. Only the elder remains, patting the earth as one might soothe a fretful child. You want us to trust what we won't live to see, he observes, not an accusation, a fact. The traveler's fingers dig into their knees. Mortals measure time in heartbeats, in harvests, in children, outgrowing last year's shoes. What right had they to bring lessons from beings who count years like breaths? Then, a giggle. The child from before crouches by the freshly turned soil, her shadow long in the fading light. She's arranged pebbles around her planted seed in a careful circle, so it won't be lonely, she explains, as if it's the simplest thing in the world. The traveler's throat tightens. Perhaps the Ents' greatest wisdom wasn't in their slowness, but in knowing that all living things, from the mightiest oak to the briefest wildflower, need someone to stand beside them while they grow. Wind stirs the dust, carrying the scent of the first sapling from the center of town. It's barely knee-high, yet its leaves already turn toward the voices murmuring at the village's edge, as if straining to join the conversation. The traveler watches the elder's face soften in the twilight. No grand speeches, no guarantees, just hands in the dirt and the stubborn, quiet hope that something planted today might outlast them all. The air hangs thick with resentment, hotter than the unrelenting sun that has baked the village's fields into cracked mosaics of despair. A crowd gathers, their shadows long and sharp as scythes against the parched earth, their voices rising like dust devils. Your trees drink first, a woman snarls, her fingers curled into fists as brittle as the husks of last season's grain. The traveler doesn't flinch, their back pressed against the slender trunks of the saplings, their leaves trembling in the arid wind. The elder steps forward, his face carved deep with lines of hunger and grief. We gave you land, he growls, and in return, you've cursed us with roots that suck the life from our children's mouths. The accusation stings, not because it's true, but because the traveler understands the fear behind it. When the world shrivels, blame clings to anything green and growing. Above, the sky churns, a tumult of bruised purple and slate gray, clouds swollen with promise, yet refusing to weep. The traveler tilts their face upward, skin tingling with the electric hum of a storm too long withheld. They close their eyes, and Fangorn's lessons rise like sap in their throat. Not a plea, not a demand, but a remembrance of how rain speaks when it falls on thirsty leaves. The first drop is always the bravest, Treebeard had murmured once, watching a storm gather over his canopy. A hush descends, so sudden it stills even the villagers' fury. Then, a sound like a sigh, a single drop strikes the traveler's cheek, cool as a blessing. Another lands on the elder's outstretched palm, pooling in the creases of his work-worn skin. For a breath, no one moves. The sky hesitates, as if testing the weight of its own generosity. Then the clouds split. Rain cascades, not in timid droplets, but in a roar that drowns out shouts and soothes the cracked earth's thirst. The villagers scatter, but the traveler stands rooted, arms spread as the saplings stretch their branches toward the deluge. The child, the one who first heard the trees singing, darts forward, her laughter bright as sunlight through the downpour. She presses her palms to the slick bark, and the traveler sees the moment, understanding dawns in her eyes. The trees weren't stealing water. They were remembering how to call it home. The storm doesn't end the drought, not completely, but as the villagers emerge from their huts to watch the land drink, something shifts in their gaze. The elder kneels, his fingers sinking into mud for the first time in years, and the traveler knows some wounds heal faster than others. The sky's gift isn't just rain. It's the chance to choose, all over again, what kind of world they'll plant in its wake. The morning after the storm dawns bright and clear, the air rinsed clean of dust and despair. Sunlight glistens on every leaf and blade of grass, turning the world into a mosaic of liquid gold and emerald. The villagers move through the transformed landscape with hesitant wonder, their fingers brushing the sapling's rain-slick bark as if touching something sacred. The traveler watches from the edge of the grove, their own palms tingling with the echo of Fangorn's voice, fainter now, but no less certain. It isn't just the trees that have grown overnight. Something in the people has shifted too, subtle as a root-cracking stone. A young mother kneels beside her daughter, guiding small hands to press a cup of precious water into the soil around a fledgling oak. Not too much, she murmurs, her voice softer than the traveler has ever heard it. Just enough to remind it we're here. The child nods solemnly, her braids still damp from the rain, and the traveler feels their throat tighten. This is the lesson the Ents could never have taught them, that patience isn't passive. It's a pact, a promise whispered between earth and hands that once only knew how to take. Yet when the wind shifts, carrying the scent of sun-warmed bark, it also brings another smell, distant but unmistakable. Smoke. The traveler's gaze drifts beyond the village fences, where the horizon still shimmers with heat. Out there, the land lies gasping, untouched by the storm's mercy. Roads wind like scars through fields of stubble, and the blackened skeletons of orchards stand as grim reminders of what happens when desperation outpaces hope. The work here has barely begun, but the world beyond won't wait for saplings to become sanctuaries. The elder finds the traveler at midday, his shadow falling across the newly damp soil. "You'll move on," he says, not unkindly. It isn't a question. The traveler looks down at their hands, still stained with the rich pigment of turned earth, and nods. Fangorn's seed was never meant to grow in one place alone. The elder exhales long and slow, then presses a bundle into their arms. A cloth-wrapped loaf, still warm from the oven, its crust studded with the last of the village hoarded hazelnuts. "For the road," he mutters, as if embarrassed by his own generosity. As the sun dips low, painting the grove in fiery hues, the traveler shoulders their pack. The child runs up, her pockets bulging with acorns she's collected from beneath the first sapling. "For the next place," she explains, pressing them into the traveler's hands. Her fingers leave smudges of dirt on their palm, and suddenly the weight of what they're carrying feels immense. Not just seeds, but stories. Stories of rain after drought, of hands learning to nurture rather than strip, of the fragile, tenacious truth that even the smallest green thing can split stone if given time. The road beckons, dusty and uncertain. Behind them, the village hums with evening activity, its people gathered around the grove as if drawn by some ancient instinct. The traveler takes a deep breath, the scent of wet earth and young leaves clinging to their clothes, and steps forward. Somewhere ahead, another hungry land waits, its people too weary to remember what their hands were made for. But the seeds pulse warm against the traveler's chest, and the whisper of leaves follows them into the gathering dark. Hooves pound against the hard-packed earth like a drumbeat of doom, stirring up dust that stings the traveler's eyes. The rider's cloak billows behind him, dark as a storm cloud, his face grim beneath the shadow of his hood. When he dismounts, the villagers shrink back, not from fear of the man, but from the words he carries. "The king's decree," he rasps, unfurling a scroll stamped with a wax seal the color of dried blood. Every standing tree, from the riverlands to the mountains, cleared by midsummer. "For the kingdom's bread," he says. A child's wail pierces the air. The traveler's fingers drift to their chest, where Fangorn's seed rests against their skin, its pulse quickening as if sensing the threat. Around them, the grove of young trees trembles, leaves shivering though the wind has died. The elder steps forward, his voice rough as bark. "You can't go," he pleads, gripping the traveler's wrist. The saplings, they listen to you. Without you, who will teach us to hear them? His fingers leave dirt-streaked prints, a silent claim, but the seed burns like an ember against the traveler's ribs. They remember Treebeard's voice, slow as shifting continents. Some roots must travel far to find their purpose. The king's decree isn't just about trees, it's about fear. Fear of hunger, fear of shadows, fear of anything that grows wild and unconquered. And fear, the traveler knows, is a fire that spreads faster than any blaze set to timber. The rider's horse stamps impatiently, its nostrils flaring at the scent of rain, still clinging to the grove. As the traveler swings onto its back, the villagers press close, their hands brushing the horse's flanks like reluctant blessings. "Come back," whispers the child who planted pebbles around her seed, her cheeks streaked with tears. The traveler can't promise that. The road ahead winds through lands where the very mention of Entish wisdom might earn them a noose instead of an audience. Then, a sound, not from the villagers, not from the horse, but from the grove itself. The saplings sway, their branches clicking together like bones in a ritual dance. No wind moves them, no hand touches them, yet their leaves rustle in a rhythm almost like speech. A chorus of young voices, singing in a language only the traveler understands. It isn't goodbye, it's a vow. The rider kicks his mount forward, and the traveler doesn't look back. But in their pocket, the seed thrums, its roots already dreaming of stony palace courtyards and the stubborn cracks where hope might yet take hold. The throne room reeks of candle wax and ambition, its gilded pillars towering over the traveler like sentinels of an unyielding order. Courtiers in silk stiff, with embroidery sneer behind jeweled hands, their laughter sharp as splintering wood. The king lounges on his dais, fingers drumming the armrests carved from ancient cedars trees that once sang, now silenced forever beneath varnish. Enough of this peasant's prattle, he booms, voice echoing off stone walls that have never known the touch of living bark. We are the crown, the law, the hand that feeds. What use have we for whispers from weeds? Yet the traveler stands firm, their cloaks still dusty from the road, their palms upturned to reveal not weapons, but soil, rich and dark, clinging to their skin like a second flesh. "Your Majesty," they begin, and the words come not as a plea, but as an offering. A tree that stands alone may break, but a forest bends together and lives. The nobles erupt, their outrage crashing like waves against a cliff. Only one remains silent, the young prince perched at the foot of the throne, his fingers tracing the grain of the oak table before him, as if reading a story in its rings. When the prince rises, the room falls still. Sunlight slants through stained glass, painting his face in fractured colors, but his eyes are clear, alight with something the court hasn't seen in generations. Curiosity, not the kind that plunders, but the kind that kneels. "Tell me," he says, quiet as a root breaking through stone, "how does Fangorn mourn?" The question hangs in the air, unexpected as rain in a drought. The traveler smiles, not at the prince, but at the sapling in a cracked urn by the window, a decorative afterthought, its leaves curling from neglect. They step forward, ignoring the guards' halberds crossing their path, and press a hand to the sapling's parched soil. It remembers, they murmur, the leaves shiver, though no wind stirs the tapestries. Then, a sound, faint as a heartbeat, but unmistakable. A single acorn rolls from the traveler's sleeve, striking the marble floor with a click that echoes like a door unbarred. The prince bends to retrieve it, his thumb brushing the cap as if it were a relic. The king barks an order, his face purpling with rage, but the prince doesn't flinch. He pockets the seed, his gaze locked with the traveler's, and in that silent exchange, something shifts. Not conquest, not surrender, but the first fragile thread of a bridge spanning the chasm between crown and earth. Outside, beyond the palace walls, the wind quickens. Somewhere in the forgotten corners of the royal gardens, an old apple tree, the last of its kind, gnarled and fruitless for decades, stirs as if waking from a long dream. Years have woven their quiet magic through the land, stitching scars with roots and softening the edges of old wounds. The traveler walks slowly now, their steps measured between the slender trunks of young oaks, whose branches arch overhead like cathedral vaults, grown from living wood. Sunlight filters through the canopy in dappled patterns that shift with every breath of wind, painting the forest floor in fleeting gold. Beside them, the prince, no, the king now, runs a calloused palm along the ridged bark of a chestnut sapling, his ceremonial robes traded for boots still caked with rich soil. The council calls it the greenwood accord. He murmurs, voice low with the weight of memory. No axe may touch these trees without the consent of those who tend them. His fingers linger where the trunk splits into two sturdy limbs, as if cradling a promise. A gust stirs the leaves into a sound like distant laughter. The traveler closes their eyes, and for a heartbeat, the grove around them dissolves, replaced by the towering shadows of Fangorn, by Treebeard's slow, rumbling greeting. The memory is so vivid, they can almost feel the ancient Ent's breath stirring their hair, smell the damp moss clinging to his roots. When they open their eyes again, the young king is watching them, his gaze sharp with understanding. He doesn't ask if it was worth it, the years of wandering, the villages that spat at their back, the nights spent whispering to saplings in abandoned courtyards. The proof surrounds them, humming in every rustling leaf, yet the traveler's smile holds no triumph, only a quiet knowing. The work is never done. Beyond this protected grove, forests still fall to desperate hands. Children still go hungry, but here, now, the earth breathes differently. The king's laws are just words precious, but fragile as parchment, while the roots beneath their feet weave a stronger covenant, one that speaks in a language older than crowns. Then, a sound, not wind, not bird call, but something deeper, vibrating through the soles of their boots. The traveler freezes, the king frowns, sensing the shift, but not yet understanding. And there, beneath the sigh of the leaves, beneath even the steady pulse of their own hearts, it comes again, a murmur like stone, grinding against stone, like the creak of ancient boughs bending in a storm. The traveler's breath catches. They know that voice. The young trees sway, though the air is still. A single acorn drops, landing soft as a kiss in the traveler's open palm. No one plants it. No one needs to. Some songs, once begun, never truly end. They only change key, finding new voices to carry them forward. The traveler curls their fingers around the seed, feeling its potential thrum against their skin, and knows Fangorn's wisdom hasn't faded. It's simply learned to travel lighter.